The sound of shattering glass echoed through the upscale restaurant's valet area as three men in dark suits cornered a woman against her silver Bentley. Daniel Ward's grip tightened around the stack of dinner plates he was clearing from the outdoor patio, his trained eyes instantly assessing the threat unfolding 30 feet away. Olivia Miller, the tech billionaire whose company had just made international headlines, stood frozen as one attacker reached for her arm while another blocked her escape route. Her designer evening dress and diamond jewelry marked her as the perfect target in the affluent district, but the kidnappers had made one critical mistake. They hadn't noticed the restaurant busboy whose military instincts had never truly disappeared. Daniel's mind automatically calculated angles, distances, and tactical advantages muscle memory from a life he'd left behind to raise his 8-year-old daughter. As the lead attacker lunged forward, Daniel moved. The ceramic plates became projectiles, then shields, then weapons. Just a busboy, they'd assumed. They were about to discover how wrong they were about the former Special Forces operative hiding in plain sight. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The ceramic dinner plate flew through the evening air with deadly precision, striking the first attacker's wrist just as his fingers closed around Olivia Miller's arm. The distinctive crack of breaking bone echoed through the upscale courtyard of La Meridian restaurant, causing the well-dressed patrons inside to turn toward the commotion beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Daniel Ward moved through the chaos with fluid grace that seemed impossible for someone wearing a restaurant busboy's uniform. The second plate in his hands became a shield, deflecting the stun gun that the lead kidnapper had drawn from his jacket. In one continuous motion, Daniel swept the attacker's legs while driving his elbow into the man's solar plexus, dropping him to the decorative brick pavement. The third attacker, realizing this was no ordinary restaurant worker, reached for something metallic inside his coat. But Daniel was already moving, his combat boots finding purchase on the Bentley's hood as he launched himself forward. The wooden serving tray he'd been carrying moments before connected with the man's temple with a hollow thud, and suddenly the upscale valet area fell silent except for the groaning of three incapacitated kidnappers. Olivia Miller stood frozen against her luxury vehicle, her emerald evening gown somehow still pristine, despite the violence that had erupted around her. Her dark eyes were wide with shock as she stared at the man who had just saved her life using nothing more than restaurant supplies and movements that belonged in a combat zone, not outside one of Blackstone City's most exclusive dining establishments. Daniel quickly scanned the perimeter, his trained gaze checking for additional threats while his hands automatically moved to zip-tie the attackers using the plastic bands he kept in his work apron, a habit from another life that had served him well. Tonight, the whole confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds, but for Olivia, it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked, his voice calm and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. His question snapped Olivia back to reality, and she shook her head mutely, still processing what she had just witnessed. In the distance, sirens wailed as someone inside the restaurant had called for help. Daniel began backing away toward the service entrance, instinctively seeking to avoid the questions that would come with police reports and media attention. But Olivia's voice stopped him. "Wait," she called out, her composure finally returning. "Who are you?" Daniel paused, his hand on the restaurant's employee door. "Just someone who was in the right place at the right time, Ms. Miller." The fact that he knew her name wasn't surprising. Olivia Miller's face had been on the cover of Business Weekly just last month, celebrating her tech company's revolutionary breakthrough in sustainable energy storage. What surprised her was the respectful way he said it, and the immediate retreat he was attempting despite having just saved her from what could have been a kidnapping or worse. As police cars pulled into the valet area and officers began securing The scene. Daniel slipped through the service door and back into the restaurant's bustling kitchen. To the outside world, he was just another invisible service worker whose shift would end in an hour. But Olivia Miller would not forget the man who had moved like a trained soldier while wearing a busboy's uniform. And she certainly wouldn't forget the controlled lethality she had witnessed in his precise, economical movements. The lead detective would later describe the incident as remarkably clean, with 3 suspects subdued using minimal necessary force. The security footage would show a brief altercation that ended quickly, though the camera angles made it difficult to see exactly how one man had taken down 3 armed assailants so efficiently. But Olivia knew what she had seen. And as she gave her statement to the police, she found herself watching the restaurant's service entrance, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious man who had appeared from nowhere to protect her, then vanished back into anonymity as quickly as he had emerged. 20-4 hours later, Daniel Ward's alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m. in the modest 2-bedroom apartment he shared with his daughter on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone in Millfield Heights. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but it was safe, affordable, and had good schools, the 3 criteria that mattered most to a single father, raising an 8-year-old on a restaurant worker's salary. His morning routine was executed with the same precision that had once guided him through hostile territories in 3 different countries. Physical training came first: 200 push-ups, 300 sit-ups, and a 5-mile run through the tree-lined streets while most of the city still slept. By 6:45, he was back home, showered, and preparing breakfast for his daughter. "Morning. Sunshine," he called softly as he knocked on Ava's bedroom door. The 8-year-old emerged with tousled blonde hair and her father's striking blue eyes, clutching a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. "Did you make pancakes?" she asked hopefully, padding into the kitchen in her favorite pajamas, the ones covered in astronauts and rockets that reflected her current obsession with space exploration. "Blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup," Daniel confirmed, setting a plate in front of her at their small dining table. "But only after you tell me what you learned yesterday in Mrs. Henderson's science class." Ava launched into an animated explanation of photosynthesis that demonstrated both her intelligence and her teacher's skill at making complex concepts accessible to young minds. Daniel listened with the focused attention he had once applied to intelligence briefings, asking follow-up questions that encouraged her natural curiosity. At 7:30 sharp, they walked hand in hand to Willowbrook Elementary, 6 blocks from their apartment. Daniel carried Ava's backpack along with his own work bag, and they used the time to practice her spelling words or discuss whatever book she was currently reading. Other parents in the neighborhood knew Daniel as the quiet, dependable single father who volunteered for school events and never missed a parent-teacher conference. What they didn't know was that he slept with a tactical knife within arm's reach, or that he had chosen their apartment specifically because it offered 3 different escape routes and a clear view of all approaches. They didn't know about the cash hidden in the false bottom of his dresser drawer, or the encrypted phone that stayed powered off unless activated by a specific emergency protocol he prayed he would never need to use. After dropping Ava at school, Daniel took the bus across town to Blackstone City's affluent Meridian district, where La Meridian restaurant catered to the city's business elite. He had worked there for 18 months, arriving early, staying late, and maintaining the near invisibility. That made him perfect for the service industry. The general manager, Patricia Kozlov, considered him her most reliable employee, always punctual, never called in sick, and somehow able to handle difficult customers with a calm professionalism that diffused tension before it could escalate. Other kitchen staff knew him as someone who kept to himself but was always willing to help with heavy lifting, or cover an extra shift when someone's car broke down or a family emergency arose. They respected his work ethic and his quiet competence, though none of them could have imagined that his knife skills had been honed in contexts far more serious than food preparation. Daniel's days at La Meridian followed a consistent pattern. Prep work in the morning, lunch service, a brief break, then dinner service until closing. He worked efficiently and methodically, whether he was washing dishes, bussing tables, or helping with food preparation. The work was honest and stable, two qualities that had become invaluable to him after the chaos of his previous life. During his break times, Daniel would often sit in the restaurant's small employee courtyard, reading books about early education or child development that he borrowed from the public library. He was constantly educating himself about how to be the best father possible to Ava, making up for the fact that he was learning parenthood through trial and error rather than the traditional two-parent partnership he had originally envisioned. Irony wasn't lost on him that he now worked in the same district where titans of industry made deals worth millions of dollars while he earned an hourly wage clearing their tables. But Daniel had made peace with this new reality. Success, he had learned, wasn't measured in salary figures or professional accolades. It was measured in a little girl's laughter, in perfect attendance at school plays, and in the knowledge that he was present for every important moment of his daughter's life. His co-workers occasionally tried to draw him into conversations about his past, curious about the faint scars on his hands or the way he seemed to notice everything happening around him. But Daniel deflected these inquiries with gentle humor and subject changes, maintaining the carefully constructed boundary between his present and his past. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the evening shift began and La Meridian's dining room filled with Blackstone City's business elite, Daniel moved through his duties with the same quiet professionalism that had made him nearly invisible for the past year and a half. He was just another service worker in an expensive restaurant, as forgettable as the luxury cars parked outside. That evening, Daniel's world revolved around a small figure bent over homework at their kitchen table. Ava had spread her math worksheets across the surface, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration, as she worked through multiplication problems that seemed to genuinely challenge her for the first time in her academic career. "Dad, I don't understand why 7 times 8 is different from 8 times 7 if they're supposed to be the same," she said, looking up with the kind of logical confusion that made Daniel's heart swell with pride. "Show me what you mean, sweetheart," he said, settling into the chair beside her. This was the moment that made everything else worthwhile. The late nights at the restaurant, the aching feet, the careful budgeting that meant generic cereal instead of name brands. This quiet time when his daughter trusted him with her questions and frustrations was more valuable than any commendation he had ever received. They worked through the math together, with Daniel using small objects from around the apartment to demonstrate the concepts visually. Ava was a kinesthetic learner, something he had discovered through careful observation and research into different learning styles. She understood concepts better when she could manipulate physical objects rather than just looking at numbers on a page. "There," she said triumphantly after successfully completing a particularly difficult problem. "I got it. 7 groups of 8 things is the same as 8 groups of 7 things, because they're the same amount of things total." "Exactly right," Daniel confirmed, ruffling her hair. "You're getting really good at thinking through problems step by step." After homework came their evening ritual, dinner preparation together. Ava stood on a step stool beside the stove, carefully stirring pasta while Daniel prepared a simple marinara sauce from scratch. Cooking together served multiple purposes. It taught her practical life skills, gave them time to talk without distractions, and allowed Daniel to stretch their grocery budget by preparing meals at home rather than relying on expensive convenience foods. "Mrs. Henderson says we're going to start learning about the solar system next week," Ava announced as she carefully added cheese to their pasta. "She says maybe we can build a model for the science fair." "That sounds like an excellent project." Daniel replied, already mentally calculating the cost of supplies and thinking about how he could help her create something impressive without breaking their budget. We could make the planets to scale and research interesting facts about each one. Ava's eyes lit up with excitement. Could we make Saturn's rings actually spin? And maybe Jupiter could light up because it has that big red spot? Daniel smiled at her enthusiasm, even as he wondered how he would figure out the engineering required to make a planetary model with moving parts. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight was about encouraging her curiosity and letting her dream big about what was possible. After dinner, they moved to the living room for reading time. This was Daniel's favorite part of the day, 30 minutes, when they would curl up together on their second-hand couch while Ava read aloud from whatever book had captured her imagination. Currently, they were working through a series about a young girl who solved mysteries with her pet cat, and Ava did different voices for each character that never failed to make Daniel laugh. When it was time for bed, Daniel tucked Ava into her small room, which he had painted pale yellow and decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. As she settled under her covers, she looked up at him with a serious expression that meant she had been thinking about something important. "Dad, why do some kids have moms and dads, and I just have you?" The question hit Daniel like a physical blow, even though he had been expecting it for months. Ava was becoming more aware of family structures around her, and it was natural that she would wonder about her own situation. "Well," he said carefully, sitting on the edge of her bed, "sometimes families look different from each other. Some kids have moms and dads, some kids have just moms, some kids have just dads, and some kids live with their grandparents or other family members. What matters isn't how many people are in your family, it's how much they love you." "But why don't I have a mom?" Daniel's throat tightened. They had talked about this before, but Ava's questions were becoming more sophisticated as she grew older. "Your mom died when you were very little, sweetheart. She loved you very much, but sometimes people get sick in ways that doctors can't fix." Ava was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she said, "But I have you, and you take care of me really well. You make good pancakes and you help me with homework and you come to all my school things." "That's right," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I will always take care of you, no matter what. That's a promise." "I know," Ava said with the simple confidence that children have in their parents. "You're really good at taking care of people. I bet you could take care of anyone." As Daniel turned off her light and kissed her forehead goodnight, her words echoed in his mind. She had no idea how literally true that statement was, or how much his ability to take care of people had cost him over the years, but she also had no idea that every sacrifice he had made to build this quiet, stable life with her had been worth it 1,000 times over. In the living room, Daniel cleaned up the remnants of their evening routine and prepared for another early morning. As he moved through these simple domestic tasks, his mind was already planning the next day, Ava's school schedule, his work shifts, the groceries they needed, the small repairs their apartment required. This was his mission now, more important than any operation he had ever undertaken, raising his daughter to be confident, curious, and kind. Everything else, his past, his lost career, the skills that sometimes surfaced in unexpected moments, was secondary to this fundamental purpose. 3 years ago, Daniel Ward had been someone else entirely. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ward of the 75th Ranger Regiment, a man whose expertise in close-quarters combat and tactical operations had made him invaluable to his unit during 4 deployments across 2 different theaters of operation. His service record was exemplary, his commendations numerous, and his future in the Army seemed secure. Until everything changed in a single devastating week. The mission had been routine, by Army standards extraction of a high-value intelligence asset from a hostile zone in the mountains of Afghanistan. Daniel's team had successfully completed similar operations dozens of times, and they approached this assignment with the confident professionalism that came from years of working together. seamlessly, but intelligence reports had been incomplete. What should have been a simple extraction turned into a 48-hour siege when their extraction point was compromised by enemy forces, who had been tracking their target for weeks. Daniel's team found themselves protecting not just their asset, but also a group of local civilians' families, with young ones who had been caught in the crossfire. The rules of engagement were clear. The mission came first. Civilian casualties were acceptable if necessary to complete the objective. But when Daniel looked at those families, huddled in terror while bullets flew over their heads, he saw Ava's face in every frightened expression. He made a choice that ended his army career, but saved 17 lives, disobeying direct orders. Daniel led his team in a tactical maneuver that prioritized civilian evacuation over mission completion. They got everyone out alive, including their intelligence asset. But the unauthorized deviation from protocol created diplomatic complications that reached all the way to Washington. The official report listed the mission as successful, but Daniel was quietly offered a choice: accept a transfer to a desk job that would effectively end his operational career, or take an honorable discharge with full benefits. For a man whose identity had been built around service and action, neither option felt like a real choice. The decision was made for him when he received a phone call that changed everything. "Sergeant Ward? This is Dr. Patricia Mills from Mercy General Hospital in Denver. I'm calling about your wife, Sarah Ward." Sarah had been driving home from her job as a pediatric nurse when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact killed her instantly, but somehow, miraculously, 18-month-old Ava had survived with only minor injuries. Daniel received the news while still dealing with the aftermath of his last mission, and suddenly the choice between a desk job and civilian life became irrelevant. He took the discharge and came home to bury his wife and figure out how to raise a daughter he barely knew. The transition from soldier to single father had been the most difficult operation of his life. Sarah had been the primary caregiver during his deployments, and Daniel realized with devastating clarity how much of Ava's early development he had missed while serving overseas. She was walking and beginning to talk, but she didn't really know him beyond the occasional video calls and brief visits between deployments. Those first months were a blur of learning curves that made ranger training seem simple by comparison. Feeding schedules, diaper changes, bedtime routines, pediatrician appointments, daycare arrangements. Daniel approached each challenge with the same methodical planning he'd once applied to combat operations. He sold their house in Colorado and moved to Blackstone City, where the cost of living was more manageable on his veterans' benefits and where he could start fresh without the constant reminders of his former life. He found work first in construction, then in restaurant service, discovering that his ability to remain calm under pressure and pay attention to details made him well suited to the fast-paced environment of commercial kitchens. The first year was the hardest. Ava went through a phase where she cried for her mother every night, and Daniel would hold her for hours, feeling completely helpless in the face of grief that he couldn't fix with tactical planning or professional competence. He read every parenting book he could find, attended support groups for single fathers, and gradually learned that being a good parent required a different kind of strength than being a good soldier. Slowly, they built their routines and their bond. Daniel discovered that Ava was brilliant, curious, and surprisingly resilient. She adapted to their new life with the flexibility that children possess, and gradually began to see Daniel not just as the man who fed her and put her to bed, but as her primary source of comfort and security. The hardest part was not the daily logistics of single parenting, but the isolation from his former life. Daniel's army buddies tried to stay in touch at first, but the distance between his new reality and their continued service created a gap that grew wider over time. He couldn't relate to their stories about new deployments and training exercises, and they couldn't understand why he seemed content clearing tables and changing diapers. He made peace with this separation gradually, coming to realize that his Priorities had fundamentally shifted in ways that made his old life feel like it had belonged to someone else. The adrenaline highs of combat operations paled in comparison to the quiet satisfaction of helping Ava with her homework or seeing her face light up when she mastered a new skill. But the training never left him. His situational awareness remained heightened, his combat reflexes stayed sharp, and his protective instincts operated on a hair trigger whenever he sensed potential danger. He had learned to control these responses in civilian settings, but they were always there beneath the surface, ready to emerge when needed. The incident at La Meridian had been the first time in 3 years that Daniel's former skills had been necessary, and the experience had stirred up feelings he thought he had successfully buried. The familiar surge of adrenaline, the clarity of purpose during crisis, the satisfaction of protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. It had all come flooding back with an intensity that surprised him. As he lay in bed that night, listening to Ava's steady breathing through the thin wall between their rooms, Daniel wondered if he had made the right choice in walking away from that life so completely. Not because he regretted his decision to prioritize his daughter, but because he was beginning to realize that his skills and experience might still have value beyond the restaurant industry. 2 days after the incident at La Meridian, Daniel's carefully constructed routine was disrupted by an unexpected visitor. He was helping Ava with her homework when the apartment building's buzzer rang, indicating someone was requesting access to the 3rd floor. "Are you expecting someone, Dad?" Ava asked, looking up from her science worksheet where she was labeling the parts of a flower. "No, sweetheart," Daniel replied, immediately alert. In 18 months of living in this building, no one had ever buzzed their apartment unannounced. He moved to the intercom with the cautious approach that had become second nature, positioning himself where he could see both the front door and Ava while maintaining cover behind the kitchen counter. "Yes," he said into the speaker. "Mr. Ward? This is Olivia Miller. I was hoping I could speak with you for a few minutes." Daniel's grip tightened on the intercom. The CEO finding his home address was concerning on multiple levels, not least because he had been so careful to keep his personal information private. "I think there's been some mistake, Ms. Miller." "Please," she said, and there was something in her voice that made Daniel pause. "I just want to thank you properly for what you did the other night. I have some information I think you should know." After a moment's hesitation, Daniel buzzed her up, then quickly moved to Ava's side. "Sweetheart, a lady from my work is coming up to talk to me about something. Could you take your homework to your room for a few minutes?" Ava looked curious, but compliant. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Daniel assured her, though his tactical instincts were already assessing potential threats and escape routes. "I just need to have a grown-up conversation." When the knock came at his door, Daniel checked through the peephole before opening it. Olivia Miller stood in the hallway, looking significantly different from the elegant woman in the evening gown he had rescued. She wore dark jeans, a simple sweater, and minimal makeup, but her presence still commanded attention in a way that spoke to natural confidence and intelligence. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said as he gestured for her to enter. "I hope I'm not intruding on your evening." "How did you find my address?" Daniel asked directly, not bothering with social pleasantries. Olivia's expression was slightly apologetic but unapologetic about her methods. "I have resources for background investigations when someone saves my life. I needed to know who you really are." "I'm exactly who I appear to be, Ms. Miller. A restaurant worker and a father." "Ah, you?" Olivia moved to the living room but remained standing, her eyes taking in the modest apartment with its second-hand furniture and Ava's school projects displayed on the refrigerator. Because Daniel Ward the busboy doesn't show up in any employment records before 18 months ago. Daniel Ward the busboy has no digital footprint, no social media presence, and pays for everything in cash. Daniel felt the familiar tension that came with having his cover examined too closely. Some people prefer privacy. And some people have reasons for staying invisible, Olivia countered. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ward of the 75th Ranger Regiment received an honorable discharge 3 years ago after 4 deployments and multiple commendations for valor under fire. The silence stretched between them while Daniel processed the implications of her knowledge. Finally he said, "What do you want, Ms. Miller?" Instead of answering immediately, Olivia reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. The 3 men who attacked me weren't random criminals. They were professionals, corporate espionage specialists with connections to several hostile foreign intelligence services. They weren't trying to kidnap me for ransom. They were trying to extract information about my company's research projects. She opened the folder and showed Daniel photographs and documents that looked like intelligence briefings. Quantum leap. Technologies has developed breakthrough battery technology that could revolutionize everything from electric vehicles to grid storage for renewable energy. Several competing nations and corporations would pay enormous sums to steal or sabotage our research. Daniel studied the documents, his trained eye automatically analyzing the threat assessment and risk factors. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because yesterday, someone tried to hack into my home security system. Today, my head of security discovered surveillance equipment planted in my office. Whoever sent those men isn't giving up. They're escalating their efforts." "Call the FBI," Daniel said, though he was already seeing the tactical challenges in protecting someone with Olivia's public profile and business responsibilities. "I have," she replied. "But federal investigations take time, and these people are moving fast. In the meantime, I need someone with your particular skills to help me identify the threat and neutralize it before they succeed." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not in that business anymore, Ms. Miller. I have responsibilities here that matter more than any security contract." "I'm not offering you a contract," Olivia said quietly. "I'm asking for your help because you're the only person who has demonstrated both the ability and the inclination to protect me from these people." From Ava's room came the sound of her practicing piano, a keyboard they had bought used from a neighbor. The simple melody of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" filled the apartment, a reminder of the life Daniel had built and the priorities that governed his decisions. "I can't," he said firmly. "My daughter needs stability, not a father who disappears into dangerous situations." Olivia was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if the dangerous situation comes to you anyway?" She pulled out another photograph, a surveillance shot of Daniel walking Ava to school that morning. The image had been taken from across the street with a telephoto lens, and it showed both father and daughter clearly. Daniel's blood ran cold. "When was this taken?" "This morning. My security team found it being transmitted to an encrypted server overseas. Whoever is targeting me knows about you now, Mr. Ward. They know where you live, where your daughter goes to school, and what route you take to work." The implications hit Daniel like a physical blow. By intervening to save Olivia, he had inadvertently exposed himself and, more importantly, exposed Ava to potential retaliation from people who operated outside the boundaries of law and morality. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled despite the fear and anger building inside him. "Work with me to identify and eliminate the threat," Olivia said. "Help me figure out who's behind these attacks and stop them before they escalate further. In return, I'll provide security for your daughter and resources to relocate both of you somewhere safe once this is resolved." Daniel looked toward Ava's room, where the piano practice had stopped and been replaced by the sound of her reading aloud to her stuffed elephant. Everything he had built over the past 3 years, their quiet life, their routines, their carefully constructed anonymity, was now at risk because he had done what his training and instincts had demanded when he saw someone in danger. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "But every day we wait gives them more time to plan their next move." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks of action against the risks of inaction. Finally, he said, "I'll need to make arrangements for my daughter's safety before I can help you with anything." "Already handled," Olivia replied, pulling out a business card. Emma Richardson is a former Secret Service agent who now runs a private security firm specializing in family protection. She's standing by to provide 24-hour security for Ava, and she has daughters of her own, so she understands how to maintain normal routines while ensuring safety. The efficiency with which Olivia had anticipated his concerns was both impressive and slightly unsettling. "You were very confident I would agree to help you." "No," Olivia said, meeting his eyes directly. "I was very hopeful that you would. Because if you don't, I'm not sure anyone can." The transformation began at 6 a.m. the next morning when Emma Richardson arrived at Daniel's apartment building. Through his peephole, Daniel observed a woman in her late 30s with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing dark slacks and a blazer that concealed what he immediately recognized as tactical gear. Her posture and the way she scanned the hallway before knocking marked her as someone with serious protective training. "Mr. Ward? I'm Emma. Miss Miller sent me to discuss security arrangements for your daughter." Daniel opened the door and was immediately impressed by Emma's directness. She didn't waste time with small talk or attempt to minimize the seriousness of the situation. Instead, she pulled out a tablet and began showing him detailed plans for Ava's protection that demonstrated both professionalism and genuine understanding of family dynamics. "The goal is invisible security," Emma explained as they sat at Daniel's kitchen table while Ava finished getting ready for school. "Your daughter's routine stays exactly the same school, same friends, same activities. The difference is that she'll never be unprotected, but she won't know it." Daniel studied the surveillance photos and personnel files Emma showed him. Her team consisted of former Secret Service agents, retired FBI personnel, and ex-Army specialists who had transitioned into private security. Each profile showed extensive experience in family protection, with particular expertise in maintaining normal routines while providing comprehensive security coverage. How many agents? 4-person rotation. 2 on close protection, rotating every 12 hours. 2 on perimeter security, covering your school and your building. All of them have experience with family protection, and 3 of them have young ones of their own. Emma's tablet displayed detailed floor plans of Willowbrook Elementary, showing sight lines, access points, and emergency protocols that her team had already coordinated with school security. The level of preparation was both impressive and sobering, reminder of how serious the threat had become. "What does she know?" "That's up to you," Emma said. Some parents prefer complete transparency. Others choose to present it as new friends or temporary helpers. Given her age, I'd recommend a middle approach. Explain that some people might want to bother her dad's friend. So Emma and her team are going to make sure everyone stays safe. When Ava emerged from her room, backpack in hand and ready for their morning walk to school, Emma introduced herself as someone who worked with Olivia Miller and would be spending time around their neighborhood to make sure everyone was safe. Ava accepted this explanation with the adaptability of youth, though Daniel noticed her studying Emma with curious eyes that reminded him of her mother's analytical nature. "Are you like a police officer?" Ava asked as they walked toward Willowbrook Elementary, unconsciously positioning herself between Daniel and Emma in a way that suggested she was already beginning to understand the protective dynamics. "Sort of," Emma replied, falling into step beside them while maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings. "My job is to make sure good people stay safe from bad people who might want to cause trouble." "Is someone trying to cause trouble for my dad?" Daniel exchanged a glance with Emma, who handled the question with practiced ease. "Some people might be upset with Ms. Miller because her company makes really important inventions. We're just making sure everyone who helps her stays safe while the police figure everything out." The walk to school took on new dimensions as Daniel observed Emma's professional techniques. She identified potential threat vectors, memorized the faces of regular pedestrians, and positioned herself to maintain clear sight lines while appearing to be engaged in casual conversation. Her experience was evident in the way she managed to be completely alert while seeming relaxed and approachable. At the school, Emma positioned herself across the street with a clear view of all entrances while maintaining enough distance to avoid drawing attention from staff or other parents. Daniel watched her establish her post and felt a mixture of relief and unease. Relief that Ava would be protected, unease that such protection was necessary. "She's good," Daniel observed as he and Emma walked back toward his building after seeing Ava safely into her classroom. "The best," Emma confirmed. "Miss Miller doesn't take chances with anything important to her, and she made it very clear that your daughter's safety is her top priority." An hour later, Daniel found himself in an unmarked sedan with Olivia, heading toward Quantum Leap Technologies headquarters in the city's Innovation District. The building was a gleaming 20-story tower of glass and steel that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie, with curved walls and surfaces that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of view. "Impressive," Daniel commented as they pulled into the executive parking garage. "Function over form," Olivia replied, though there was pride in her voice. "Every design element serves a purpose. The windows are ballistic glass. The curves eliminate sniper sight lines, and the parking garage has 3 different exit routes. You built this expecting threats." "I built this expecting success," she corrected. "And success in the technology sector always attracts unwanted attention." The interior of Quantum Leap Technologies was even more impressive than the exterior. The lobby soared 3 stories high, with a digital waterfall cascading down one wall and interactive displays showcasing the company's innovations in sustainable energy storage. Employees moved through this space with the focused energy of people working on projects that excited them, and Daniel could see why Olivia had been successful in attracting top talent from established tech giants. But as they rode the executive elevator to the 20th floor, Daniel's tactical instincts were cataloging security vulnerabilities. The open floor plan that encouraged collaboration also eliminated cover and concealment. The floor-to-ceiling windows that provided spectacular views also offered potential access points for surveillance or worse. The electronic keycard systems that controlled access could be hacked by someone with sufficient expertise. "Tell me about your security protocols," Daniel said as they entered Olivia's corner office. For the next 2 hours, Olivia walked him through Quantum Leap security systems, personnel files, and recent projects. What Daniel discovered was both impressive and concerning. The company's digital security was state-of-the-art, but their physical security relied heavily on technology rather than human intelligence and intuition. "Your system is designed to stop casual industrial espionage," Daniel observed, studying the building schematics on Olivia's wall-mounted displays. "But the people targeting you are operating at a much higher level. What do you see that we're missing?" Daniel moved to the windows and began pointing out sight lines from neighboring buildings, potential entry points that the electronic sensors might miss, and gaps in coverage that could be exploited by someone with advanced training. "Your security team is thinking like corporate executives protecting intellectual property. These people are thinking like military operatives conducting an extraction. So what do? We think like them," Daniel replied, his analytical mind already working through countermeasures and tactical responses. "We identify their objectives, anticipate their methods, and turn their advantages into vulnerabilities." The next phase of their investigation took them to Quantum Leap's research and development labs, where Daniel got his first look at the battery technology that had made Olivia's company so valuable and so dangerous. The lab was a clean room environment filled with equipment that looked like something from a space program, and the scientists working there moved with the careful precision of people handling materials worth millions of dollars. "This is Dr. Arthur Beaumont, our lead researcher," Olivia said, introducing Daniel to a tall, thin man in his 50s with the distracted air of someone whose mind was usually focused on problems involving molecular structures and energy density calculations. "The breakthrough came 6 months ago," Dr. Beaumont explained as he showed them the prototype batteries that were no larger than smartphone power cells but could store 10 times the energy of conventional lithium-ion technology. "We've solved the safety and scalability issues that have plagued high-density storage for decades." "Who else knows the specific details?" Daniel asked. "The complete technical specifications." "Just the core research team, 5 people including myself. But the general principles and some of the manufacturing processes are known to perhaps 20 employees across different departments." Daniel studied the lab's security measures and personnel access logs, looking for patterns that might indicate insider involvement. What he found was troubling. Several employees had accessed research files outside their normal work responsibilities, and the digital audit trails showed signs of sophisticated intrusion attempts that had been partially successful. "Someone's been conducting surveillance from the inside," Daniel told Olivia as they returned to her office. "The external attacks are just one part of a coordinated effort. They have someone feeding them information about your schedules, security protocols, and research progress." "That's impossible," Olivia said, but her expression showed that she was already reconsidering what she thought she knew about her own company. "Everyone with access to sensitive information has been with us for years. They've all been background checked and cleared." "Background checks show past behavior," Daniel replied. "They don't predict future choices. Financial pressure, personal relationships, ideological conflicts. There are dozens of reasons why a trusted employee might become a security risk." The realization that the threat came from within as well as without fundamentally changed the nature of their challenge. Instead of simply protecting Olivia from external attackers, they now had to identify and neutralize a traitor who had intimate knowledge of the company's operations and unlimited access to its most sensitive information. "We need to narrow down the suspect list," Daniel said, studying the personnel files that Olivia had provided. "Look at recent behavioral changes, financial stress indicators, unusual travel patterns, anything that might suggest someone is operating under external influence." As they worked through the afternoon, Daniel found himself impressed by Olivia's analytical abilities and her willingness to ask difficult questions about people she had trusted for years. She approached the investigation with the same systematic thinking that had built her company, but he could see the emotional toll of questioning her employees' loyalty. "This is the hardest part," she said during a brief break, staring out at the city skyline beyond her office windows. "I've worked with some of these people since the beginning. They've been to my house for dinner. I've met their families. I thought I knew them." "People aren't always who we think they are," Daniel replied, thinking of his own carefully constructed identity as a restaurant worker and single father. "Sometimes they surprise us in good ways, sometimes in bad ways." By evening, they had identified 7 employees whose access patterns and recent behavior warranted closer scrutiny. But as Daniel prepared to return home to Ava, he realized that the investigation was going to be much more complex and time-consuming than either of them had anticipated. The people targeting Quantum Leap Technologies weren't ordinary criminals or even typical corporate spies. They were professionals with resources, patience, and inside knowledge that made them extremely dangerous. Stopping them would require all of Daniel's tactical expertise and more cooperation between him, Olivia, than either of them had expected. When this partnership began, 3 days into their collaboration, Daniel's life had been completely reorganized around protecting Olivia Miller and investigating the threats against her company. His schedule at La Meridian had been reduced to weekend shifts, with Olivia quietly compensating him for the lost income, while maintaining the fiction that he was still primarily a restaurant worker. Emma Richardson had seamlessly integrated herself into Ava's routine, becoming the friendly neighborhood security expert who happened to be around whenever Ava was walking to school, playing in the park, or attending her after-school piano lessons. To Ava, Emma was simply another adult who had become part of their expanded circle, someone who knew interesting facts about safety and had exciting stories about her previous work protecting important people. Emma says she used to travel all over the world keeping people safe, Ava announced one evening as Daniel helped her with homework. She's been to Dubai and London and Tokyo. She says maybe someday when everything is quiet again, we could visit some of those places. Daniel felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify, not jealousy exactly, but awareness that Emma's presence in their lives represented possibilities and experiences he couldn't provide on his own. That sounds like it would be an adventure, he said, pushing aside the complex emotions that came with accepting help from others. His days now began at 5 a.m. with a secure phone call from Olivia, reviewing the previous night's intelligence reports and planning the day's activities. The encrypted communication device she had provided allowed them to coordinate without using conventional phones that could be monitored or hacked. "We've identified the surveillance equipment," Olivia reported during one of these early morning calls. "It's more sophisticated than we initially thought, military-grade stuff that requires significant technical expertise to deploy and operate." Daniel was pulling on his workout clothes as he listened, maintaining his physical training routine even as his priorities shifted. That confirms professional involvement. Corporate espionage firms don't typically have access to that level of technology. There's something else. Our IT security team found traces of the intrusion software. It's the same signature that was used in attacks against defense contractors last year. The implication hit Daniel immediately. Foreign intelligence service. That's what we're thinking. Someone with state-level resources is very interested in our battery technology. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. What had begun as corporate espionage was now potentially an operation involving foreign governments seeking to steal technology that could have significant military and economic applications. Daniel's protective instincts, already heightened by threats to Ava's safety, intensified as he realized they were dealing with adversaries who operated by entirely different rules than conventional criminals. His investigation methods evolved accordingly. Instead of simply reviewing personnel files and financial records, Daniel began conducting the kind of counterintelligence analysis he had learned during his Army service. He studied travel patterns, communication metadata, and behavioral indicators that might reveal foreign recruitment or coercion. "I need access to your employees' complete digital footprints," he told Olivia during one of their afternoon strategy sessions in her office. "Email patterns, browsing history, social media activity, financial transactions, anything that might show external influence or pressure." "That's a significant invasion of privacy," Olivia replied, though her tone suggested she was considering the necessity rather than rejecting the idea. "Privacy concerns are secondary to security threats," Daniel said bluntly. "If someone in your organization is feeding information to foreign intelligence services, they've already compromised everyone's privacy and safety." Olivia was quiet for a moment, weighing ethical concerns against practical necessities. Finally, she nodded. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Recruitment indicators, sudden financial improvements, travel to specific countries, contact with individuals who don't fit their normal social patterns, changes in political or ideological expressions." Foreign intelligence services are very systematic in how they identify and develop assets. The deeper they went into the investigation, the more Daniel found himself thinking like a soldier again, rather than a civilian. The analytical frameworks, the systematic approach to threat assessment, the willingness to make hard choices based on incomplete information, all of it felt familiar in ways that were both comforting and unsettling. "You're different when you're working," Olivia observed one afternoon as they reviewed surveillance footage from the Quantum Leap building. More focused, more decisive. "This is what I was trained for," Daniel replied, not looking away from the screens showing employee movement patterns throughout the facility. Pattern recognition, threat analysis, operational planning. "I spent 8 years developing these skills. Do you miss it?" The question caught him off guard, partly because he had been avoiding asking it himself. "I miss the clarity," he said. "Finally. When you're in a combat zone, the objectives are clear, the stakes are obvious, and the metrics for success are unambiguous. Civilian life is more complicated, but less dangerous." "Usually," Daniel agreed, thinking about the current situation that had brought exactly the kind of danger he had tried to leave behind directly into his family's life. Their working relationship deepened as they spent more time together, developing the kind of professional trust that allowed them to anticipate each other's thinking and coordinate their efforts seamlessly. Olivia's strategic mind complemented Daniel's tactical expertise, and they began functioning as an effective team in ways that surprised both of them. "I understand why you were successful in the army," Olivia said one evening as they finalized plans for monitoring several suspect employees. "You think 3 steps ahead and prepare for contingencies that most people wouldn't consider." "You do the same thing in business," Daniel replied. "The skills are transferable. Except in business. The consequences of failure are financial. In your world, they were life and death." "They still are," Daniel said quietly, thinking about Ava asleep at home under Emma's protection, and about Olivia's safety becoming increasingly important to him for reasons that extended beyond professional obligation. During their second week of investigation, Daniel's analysis began revealing disturbing patterns that suggested the threat was even more complex than they had realized. The surveillance of Quantum Leap wasn't limited to foreign intelligence services. There were also indicators of domestic corporate espionage, financial manipulation, and what appeared to be coordination between different hostile actors. "Look at this," Daniel said, showing Olivia a timeline he had constructed from various data sources. "The foreign intelligence contacts began 6 months ago, right after your battery breakthrough was announced. But the financial irregularities in your company go back almost 2 years. What kind of irregularities?" "Someone has been manipulating your stock price through coordinated trading patterns, probably to accumulate a significant position before attempting a hostile takeover. The foreign espionage is just one vector of attack. There's also a financial assault happening simultaneously." Olivia studied the evidence with the kind of focused attention that had made her successful as a technology executive. "You're saying we're being targeted by multiple hostile actors with different objectives, but coordinated timing." "Exactly. Someone is orchestrating a complex operation designed to acquire your technology through multiple approaches: theft, corporate takeover, and possibly legal manipulation through regulatory capture." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, involving levels of resources and coordination that suggested involvement by major corporations, foreign governments, and possibly corrupt elements within regulatory agencies. Daniel realized they were facing adversaries with the ability to manipulate legal systems, financial markets, and intelligence networks simultaneously. "We're outgunned," he told Olivia bluntly. "The people orchestrating this have resources we can't match and influence we can't counter through conventional means. So what do? We level the playing field," Daniel said, his mind already working through unconventional approaches that drew on his military experience with asymmetric warfare. "We can't match their resources, but we can be more agile, more unpredictable, and more focused than they are." The breakthrough came during their second week of investigation, when Daniel's analysis of communication patterns revealed that Dr. Arthur Beaumont had been having regular contact with someone who didn't exist in any conventional databases. The phone number traced to a series of corporate shells that ultimately led to a known front for foreign intelligence operations. He's not a traitor by choice, Daniel concluded after reviewing the evidence. Look at the timeline. The contact began right after his daughter started her freshman year at Northwestern University. Someone approached him through her. Olivia stared at the evidence with a mixture of betrayal and sympathy. They're using his daughter as leverage. Classic recruitment technique. Find someone with access to valuable information and create pressure. Points that force cooperation. His daughter probably has no idea she's being used. What do? We turn the situation to our advantage, Daniel said, his mind already working through operational possibilities. Dr. Beaumont becomes our asset instead of theirs. The plan they developed required Daniel to reveal more of his background than he was comfortable with, but the operational necessities outweighed personal security concerns. When they confronted Dr. Beaumont in his lab after hours, Daniel introduced himself not as a restaurant worker helping with security, but as a former Army intelligence specialist working to protect Quantum Leap from foreign espionage. They told me they would hurt Sarah if I didn't cooperate, Dr. Beaumont confessed, the relief of finally being able to tell someone evident in his voice. They knew her class schedule, her dormitory room number, her friends' names. They said it would look like an accident. How much information have you provided? Daniel asked. Research summaries, production timelines, security protocols. Nothing complete enough to replicate our work, but enough to give them significant insights into our capabilities. That ends now, Daniel said firmly. We're going to help you protect your daughter, but you're going to help us identify and stop the people threatening her. Dr. Beaumont agreed immediately, eager to escape the impossible situation he had been trapped in. But as Daniel and Olivia developed their counter-operation, they both realized that they were now fully committed to a dangerous game that would require all of their combined skills and resources to win. The investigation had become something much larger than either of them had anticipated, a counterintelligence operation against foreign agents with the potential to impact national security. Daniel's quiet life as a single father was now completely intertwined with protecting not just Olivia, but technology that could change the global balance of power. There's no going back to the way things were, Daniel told Olivia as they reviewed their operational plans late one evening in her office. Win or lose, this changes everything for both of us. I know, she replied, and he could see in her expression that she understood the full implications of what they were undertaking. Are you prepared for that? Daniel thought about Ava safely, asleep under Emma's protection, and about the future he wanted to build for both of them. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to keep the people I care about safe. The commitment was mutual, total, and would demand everything they had learned about leadership, strategy, and survival in their respective careers. They were no longer just protecting a company or investigating corporate espionage. They were fighting for their freedom, their future, and their right to live without being controlled by forces that saw them as obstacles to be eliminated. Trap was set for the following Thursday evening, when Dr. Beaumont would deliver what appeared to be a complete technical specification for Quantum Leap's battery technology to his foreign handlers. In reality, the documents contained sophisticated disinformation that would mislead any attempt to replicate the technology while revealing the full scope of the intelligence operation targeting the company. Daniel spent 2 days conducting reconnaissance on the meeting location, a seemingly innocent coffee shop in the university district that provided perfect cover for intelligence exchanges. The establishment had multiple entrances, good sight lines, and enough ambient noise to mask conversation, making it an ideal choice for clandestine meetings. I count 3 possible surveillance positions and at least 2 escape routes, he reported to Olivia as they reviewed his tactical assessment. The meeting is scheduled for 7 p.m., which means they'll have watchers in position by 6:30. What about Dr. Beaumont's safety? Olivia asked. She had grown genuinely concerned about her lead researcher, seeing him as another victim of the forces targeting her company rather than a simple traitor. "He'll be wearing a wire and a GPS tracker," Daniel replied. "I'll have overwatch from across the street, and we'll have backup teams positioned at the exit routes. If anything goes wrong, we can extract him within 60 seconds. The plan seemed solid, with multiple contingencies and clear protocols for every foreseeable scenario. Daniel had coordinated with Emma's security team to ensure comprehensive coverage of the operation, while maintaining enough separation to avoid compromising their investigation if federal agencies were monitoring the area. But as Daniel positioned himself in the second-floor window of a bookstore across from the coffee shop, watching Dr. Beaumont enter the target building at precisely 7 p.m., his instincts were warning him that something was fundamentally wrong. The foreign intelligence operatives were too relaxed, too confident. Instead of the careful surveillance and security protocols he expected from professionals conducting a high-stakes operation, they seemed almost casual about the meeting. The handler who approached Dr. Beaumont was younger than anticipated, and his body language suggested excitement rather than the controlled caution that should characterize such an encounter. "Something's off," Daniel said into his encrypted radio, speaking to the backup team positioned around the area. "They're acting like this is routine rather than a critical intelligence exchange. Maybe they've done this so many times it has become routine," came Emma's voice through his earpiece. She was coordinating the operation from a mobile command post 3 blocks away, monitoring multiple communication channels and tracking all participants in real time. But Daniel's unease intensified when he observed a third person approaching the coffee shop, someone who didn't fit the profile of either intelligence operatives or casual customers. The man moved with the purposeful stride of someone with tactical training, and his eyes swept the environment in patterns that suggested counterintelligence awareness. "We've got a problem," Daniel said urgently into his radio. "Third party approaching. The target, army bearing, conducting counter-surveillance. This might be a setup." Before anyone could respond, Daniel's worst fears were confirmed. Instead of a simple document exchange, the meeting in the coffee shop erupted into controlled chaos as multiple teams of operatives revealed themselves simultaneously. Dr. Beaumont was surrounded not by foreign spies seeking technology secrets, but by what appeared to be federal agents conducting a sting operation. "Federal raid in progress," Daniel reported, watching as FBI windbreakers became visible throughout the coffee shop and surrounding area. "Dr. Beaumont is in federal custody. The Pautazine." Realization hit him with devastating clarity. The foreign intelligence operation had been detected and monitored by federal authorities, who had been conducting their own investigation, parallel to Daniel and Olivia's efforts. Dr. Beaumont's cooperation with the suspected spies had made him a target of federal prosecution, and their attempt to turn him into a double agent had inadvertently delivered him directly into the hands of law enforcement. "Get out of there," Emma's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Federal agencies don't know about our operation. If they identify you, it could compromise everything." But as Daniel prepared to withdraw from his surveillance position, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. Across the street, in the same building where the federal agents were conducting their operation, he caught a glimpse of a face he recognized from Quantum Leap's personnel files. Lucas White, the company's head of security, speaking quietly with someone who was clearly a federal supervisor. The betrayal was more complete than any of them had realized. The foreign intelligence operation had been a distraction designed to draw attention away from the real threat. Lucas White had been feeding information not just to foreign adversaries, but to federal agencies conducting their own investigation into Quantum Leap's technology. The company was being targeted from multiple directions simultaneously, with different government and corporate interests, all seeking to control or acquire Olivia's breakthrough innovations. "We've been played," Daniel said into his radio, his voice tight with controlled anger. The head of security is compromised. He's been coordinating with federal agencies while we've been chasing foreign spies. What does that mean? Came Olivia's voice through the communication channel. She was monitoring the operation from her office, where she had been waiting for news of their success in neutralizing the threat against her company. It means the threat is bigger than we thought, Daniel replied, already planning their next moves. We're not just dealing with corporate espionage or foreign intelligence. Someone in the federal government wants your technology, and they're using multiple approaches to get it. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Quantum Leap Technologies was being targeted by coordinated efforts involving foreign intelligence, services, federal agencies, and internal corporate sabotage. Olivia's battery technology was valuable enough to attract attention from multiple competing interests, all of whom were willing to use illegal or unethical methods to acquire it. As Daniel watched federal agents securing the coffee shop and processing their detainees, he began to understand the true complexity of their situation. The foreign intelligence operation had been real, but it had also been allowed to continue specifically because it provided cover for domestic agencies to conduct their own intelligence gathering against Quantum Leap. Dr. Beaumont had been caught in the middle of competing intelligence operations, with foreign services trying to recruit him while federal agencies monitored those recruitment attempts to gather information about both the technology and the foreign intelligence capabilities. Targeting American companies. We need to extract Dr. Beaumont before he tells federal investigators about our operation, Daniel said, his mind already working through tactical possibilities. If they learn about our counterintelligence efforts, it could expose everything we've discovered about the larger conspiracy. Can we do that? Olivia asked. Not without escalating this situation significantly, Daniel replied honestly. Federal custody is different from corporate security or even foreign intelligence operations. Breaking someone out of federal detention requires resources and expertise that could put all of us at serious legal risk. But even as he spoke, Daniel was observing something that changed his assessment of their options. Lucas White was leaving the federal operation area, moving toward a vehicle that didn't match the standard government fleet. The head of security wasn't just cooperating with federal agencies, he was being handled by someone else entirely. White's not working for the government, Daniel reported, tracking the man's movement through his surveillance scope. He's being run by a third party that's coordinating with federal agencies but isn't part of them. The implications were staggering. Quantum Leap was being targeted by a complex network that included foreign intelligence services, federal agencies, and private interests that had managed to coordinate their efforts while maintaining operational separation. Someone with significant resources and political connections was orchestrating a multifaceted assault on Olivia's company. Corporate takeover, Olivia said, her voice reflecting the realization that was hitting her. Someone's using intelligence operations and federal investigations to weaken our position before launching a hostile acquisition. That's my assessment, Daniel confirmed, watching as Lucas White disappeared into traffic while federal agents continued their operation. The foreign espionage creates justification for federal investigation. The federal investigation creates legal and financial pressure, and both situations create opportunities for a coordinated corporate acquisition at a severely reduced price. The magnitude of their situation was becoming clear. What had begun as protecting Olivia from kidnapping had evolved into uncovering a conspiracy that reached into federal agencies, foreign governments, and major corporate interests. The people orchestrating this operation had resources that could manipulate legal systems, intelligence networks, and financial markets simultaneously. We're not equipped for this level of opposition, Daniel told Olivia through the encrypted communication channel. We need to consider extraction options, getting you and your key personnel out of the country before these people can complete whatever they're planning. I won't abandon my company, Olivia replied immediately. This technology could revolutionize sustainable energy and help address climate change. I won't let it be suppressed or controlled by people who care more about profit and power than about solving global problems. Daniel understood her position, but his protective instincts were focused on more immediate concerns. The conspiracy targeting Quantum Leap had tentacles, reaching into multiple government agencies and foreign intelligence services. Anyone standing in the way of their objectives would be eliminated through whatever means proved most effective: legal prosecution, physical elimination, or simply disappearing into detention facilities that operated outside conventional legal protections. Then we need to change our approach, Daniel said, watching the last of the federal agents clear the coffee shop while maintaining surveillance on the area where Lucas White had disappeared. We're not just protecting your company anymore. We're fighting for your survival against people who have the authority to make problems disappear permanently. As he prepared to withdraw from his surveillance position and rendezvous with Olivia, Daniel realized that their situation had fundamentally changed. They were no longer investigating corporate espionage or foreign intelligence operations. They were fighting for their freedom against a conspiracy that operated at levels where legal protections meant nothing and conventional resistance would be futile. The real battle was just beginning, and it would require every skill, resource, and contact they could marshal to survive what was coming next. Daniel's quiet life as a single father and Olivia's position as a technology executive were both now secondary to a much more basic objective: staying alive long enough to expose the truth and protect the people they cared about from forces that viewed them as expendable obstacles to much larger objectives. The emergency meeting took place at 2 a.m. in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, far from the surveillance networks that monitored downtown Blackstone City. Daniel had chosen the location specifically for its isolation and the tactical advantages it offered: multiple exit routes, clear sight lines, and enough space to maneuver if the situation deteriorated into violence. Olivia arrived first, accompanied by Emma Richardson and 2 other security specialists who had been protecting Ava throughout the crisis. The little girl was safely hidden at a secure location outside the city, under the protection of Emma's most trusted agents. But Daniel's protective instincts remained on high alert, knowing that his daughter's safety depended on the success of tonight's operation. The federal investigation has been suspended, Olivia reported, as they established their command post in the warehouse's main floor. Someone with significant political influence made calls that resulted in Dr. Beaumont being released on his own recognizance pending further review. That's not good news, Daniel replied, studying the satellite imagery and surveillance reports that Emma's team had compiled. It means our adversaries have enough political connections to manipulate federal agencies directly. The scope of the conspiracy had become clearer over the past 48 hours through Daniel's analysis of intercepted communications and financial records. Quantum Leap Technologies was being targeted by a coalition of interests that included foreign intelligence services, corrupt federal officials, and a major energy corporation seeking to prevent breakthrough battery technology from disrupting their market dominance. At the center of the conspiracy was Lucas White, who had been recruited not by foreign agents, but by Sterling Energy Corporation, a multinational conglomerate with enough political influence to coordinate complex operations involving multiple government agencies. The foreign intelligence involvement had been real but secondary. Sterling had allowed foreign espionage to continue because it provided cover for their own industrial sabotage and corporate acquisition efforts. Dr. Beaumont agreed to meet with U.S., Emma reported, monitoring communications through encrypted channels that Daniel had established using techniques learned during his Army intelligence training. He's bringing documentation that proves the federal investigation was compromised from the beginning. What about White? Still in the wind. After the federal operation, he disappeared completely. No credit card activity, no phone signals, no digital footprint. Professional extraction. Daniel nodded, unsurprised by the head of security's disappearance. People at Lucas White's level of involvement in corporate espionage rarely survived. To face prosecution, they either disappeared into witness protection programs or simply disappeared permanently, depending on how much liability they represented to their handlers. At 2:30 a.m., Dr. Beaumont arrived at the warehouse looking haggard, but determined. The federal detention had broken whatever remaining loyalty he felt toward his blackmailers, and he carried a briefcase containing evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy. They never intended to just steal the technology, he explained, as he spread documents across a makeshift table. Sterling Energy wants to acquire Quantum Leap completely, but at a fraction of its actual value. The foreign espionage creates national security concerns that justify federal investigation. The federal investigation creates legal and financial pressure that depresses the stock price, and the depressed stock price makes a hostile takeover. Financially feasible. How long have they been planning this? Olivia asked, studying the timeline that Dr. Beaumont's documents revealed. At least 2 years. They've been accumulating Quantum Leap stock through shell companies, planting operatives in your organization, and building relationships with federal officials who could be influenced to support their objectives. Daniel examined the evidence with the analytical skills he had developed during counterintelligence operations. The conspiracy was sophisticated and well coordinated, but it also had vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with the right knowledge and resources. They made one critical mistake, he said, pointing to specific communications intercepts that Dr. Beaumont had managed to obtain. They assumed their operation was secure because it involved federal agencies and foreign intelligence services. But that complexity also created multiple points of failure. What do you mean? Olivia asked. They're coordinating between foreign agents, federal officials, corporate executives, and criminal elements. Each of those groups has different objectives, different security protocols, and different vulnerabilities. We can't take on the entire conspiracy, but we can exploit the contradictions between its component parts. The plan Daniel outlined was audacious and extremely dangerous, requiring precise timing and coordination between multiple moving parts. Instead of trying to expose the conspiracy through conventional legal channels that could be manipulated or suppressed, they would create a situation where the different elements of the conspiracy would be forced to reveal themselves publicly while simultaneously destroying each other's credibility. The foreign intelligence operatives don't know about Sterling Energy's involvement, Daniel explained. The federal officials don't know about the foreign intelligence coordination. And the Sterling executives don't know about the criminal elements that Lucas White has been using for direct action operations. So we make them all visible simultaneously, Olivia said, understanding the tactical concept immediately. Exactly. We create a crisis that forces each group to respond according to their own protocols and objectives. When they do, they'll expose not just themselves, but the connections between different parts of the conspiracy. The operation required Dr. Beaumont to return to Quantum Leap and announce a fake breakthrough in the battery technology at development, so significant that it would trigger immediate responses from all the hostile actors targeting the company. Each group would attempt to acquire or sabotage the technology according to their own plans, creating a convergence of criminal activity that would be impossible to ignore or suppress. I'll be bait, Dr. Beaumont said, understanding his role in the plan. When I announce the breakthrough, everyone targeting Quantum Leap will move simultaneously. And we'll be waiting, Daniel confirmed, with surveillance, recording equipment, and enough evidence to expose the entire network. But as they finalized the operational details, Daniel's secure communication device buzzed with an emergency alert from the team protecting Ava, his daughter's safe house had been located by unknown hostiles who were currently conducting surveillance of the facility. They found her, Emma said, monitoring the situation through her tactical communications network. At least 6 operatives, professional-grade equipment, coordinated movement patterns. Daniel's protective instincts exploded into action. Everything else, the conspiracy, the technology, even Olivia's safety, became secondary to getting to his daughter before she could be used as leverage against him. How did they find her? He demanded, already planning extraction routes and tactical responses. Unknown. The safe house location was restricted to 4 people, all of whom are currently in this warehouse. The implication was devastating. Someone in their group was compromised, either voluntarily or through coercion they hadn't detected. Daniel's eyes swept across the team members present, analyzing each person's behavior and possible motivations for betrayal. It doesn't matter. How, he said, forcing himself to focus on immediate tactical necessities rather than the security failure that had endangered his daughter. What matters is getting her out safely. Safely. The rescue operation required Daniel to split his attention between protecting Olivia and rescuing Ava. A tactical nightmare that divided his resources at the worst possible moment. But Emma's security team was professional and experienced, and they quickly developed a plan that allowed Daniel to lead the extraction while maintaining security for their primary operation. Go, Olivia said, understanding that nothing else mattered until his daughter was safe. We'll delay the main operation until you return. No, Daniel replied firmly. The longer we wait, the more time they have to consolidate their position and prepare countermeasures. Start the operation on schedule. I'll get Ava to safety and rendezvous with you before the situation escalates. The next hour unfolded with the precision and intensity of Daniel's most challenging combat operations. Leading a 3-person extraction team, he approached the safe house using urban warfare techniques that allowed them to neutralize the surveillance team without alerting whoever had sent them. The hostile operatives were professionals, but they weren't prepared for someone with Daniel's level of training and operational experience. Using non-lethal methods that would avoid creating additional legal complications, his team systematically eliminated the threat while extracting Ava from the safe house. "Dad!" she exclaimed when she saw him, running into his arms with the kind of relief that reminded him why everything else in his life was secondary to her safety and well-being. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said, holding her tightly while scanning for additional threats. "We're going somewhere even safer now." The secondary safe house was a rural property that Emma's organization maintained for exactly these kinds of emergency extractions. As Daniel settled Ava with a protection team that included women with experience caring for young people in crisis situations, he realized that his daughter's resilience and adaptability continued to amaze him. "Are you going back to help Ms. Miller?" Ava asked, demonstrating the perceptiveness that constantly surprised him. "Yes, some bad people are trying to hurt her and steal her inventions." "Will you be careful?" "I will be very careful," he promised, kissing her forehead. "And I will come back to you as soon as I can." By the time Daniel returned to the main operation, Dr. Beaumont had already announced the fake breakthrough, and the responses were beginning to cascade exactly as predicted. Foreign intelligence operatives were moving to acquire the technology through theft. Federal agencies were preparing to seize the research under national security provisions, and Sterling Energy's corporate acquisition team was accelerating their hostile takeover timeline. But the most dangerous response came from the criminal elements that Lucas White had been coordinating. Instead of subtle surveillance or legal manipulation, they were preparing for a direct assault on Quantum Leap headquarters. Designed to acquire the technology through force and eliminate any witnesses who could expose their employers. 12 hostiles approaching the building, Emma reported from her surveillance post. Military-grade equipment, coordinated tactics, and what appears to be explosives for breaching operations. Federal response? Daniel asked. Delayed by coordinated interference with their communication systems. Someone with significant technical capabilities is jamming their emergency frequencies. The situation was unfolding exactly as Daniel had predicted, but the scale and intensity of the responses exceeded even his expectations. Instead of subtle maneuvering by different competing interests, they were facing a convergence of hostile actions that threatened to destroy Quantum Leap headquarters and everyone inside it. Evacuate all personnel except essential security staff, Daniel ordered, shifting into the command mode that had served him during the most challenging operations of his Army career. Get Olivia to the secure conference room on the 20th floor and establish defensive positions at all access points. The final confrontation took place in Quantum Leap's headquarters building, with Daniel coordinating the defense against multiple hostile elements while simultaneously gathering evidence of their coordination and objectives. The building's security systems, enhanced by Emma's tactical expertise, proved sufficient to delay but not stop the various assault teams. But the real victory came when the different hostile groups encountered each other during their simultaneous operations. Foreign intelligence operatives found themselves in firefights with Sterling Energy's private contractors, while federal agents responding to the emergency discovered clear evidence of corporate espionage and foreign intelligence operations occurring simultaneously. The conspiracy's strength, its coordination between multiple powerful interests, became its weakness when those interests were forced to operate simultaneously in the same location. Each group's operational security was compromised by the presence of the others, creating a cascade of evidence that exposed not just individual crimes, but the systematic coordination between them. When the situation finally stabilized 3 hours later, Daniel found himself in Quantum Leap's executive conference room with Olivia, surrounded by evidence that would ensure prosecution of the conspiracy's participants and protection of the breakthrough technology that had made them all targets. "It's over," he said, though the exhaustion in his voice reflected the cost of the operation in terms of stress, resources, and risk to everyone involved. "The immediate threat is over," Olivia corrected, "but everything else is just beginning." 6 months later, Daniel Ward stood in the kitchen of a house he still couldn't quite believe was his, preparing breakfast for Ava while she practiced piano in the living room. The modest 2-story home in Willowbrook Heights had been Olivia's idea, a place where they could establish routines and build the kind of stable life that Ava deserved, but with security measures that would prevent anyone from threatening their family again. The aftermath of the Quantum Leap conspiracy had been swift and comprehensive. Sterling Energy Corporation faced federal prosecution for industrial espionage, while several federal officials were indicted for corruption and abuse of authority. The foreign intelligence operatives had been quietly deported as part of diplomatic negotiations that avoided international incidents while ensuring they could never return to target American technology companies. Lucas White had been found dead in a hotel room in Mexico, apparently killed by his former employers, to prevent him from providing testimony that could expose additional criminal activities. Daniel felt no satisfaction at the news. White had been a tool used by more powerful interests, and his death was simply another casualty of forces that operated beyond conventional legal and moral boundaries. Dr. Arthur Beaumont had received immunity in exchange for his cooperation with federal prosecutors, and his daughter had been relocated to a secure university program that would allow her to complete her education without fear of retaliation. The lead researcher had returned to Quantum Leap with a renewed commitment to the technology that could help address climate change and reduce global dependence on fossil fuels. "Dad, do you think I played that song better today?" Ava called from the living room, her voice carrying the confidence of a young person who had learned to adapt to extraordinary circumstances while maintaining her essential optimism and curiosity. "I think you played it beautifully," Daniel replied, carrying a plate of pancakes to the dining room table that Olivia had helped them select during one of their weekend shopping trips. "But I'm not exactly an expert on piano music." "Ms. Miller," Says I have good rhythm and that I should keep practicing because music is good for developing mathematical thinking. The relationship between Ava and Olivia had evolved naturally over the months since the crisis ended. What had begun as formal interactions between a CEO and the daughter of her security consultant had grown into genuine affection and mutual respect. Olivia had no experience with young people, but she approached the relationship with the same systematic thinking that had made her successful in business, learning about Ava's interests and needs with focused attention. Speaking of Ms. Miller, Daniel said, checking his watch, she should be here in about 20 minutes for our planning meeting. The meeting was one of many that had become routine as Daniel transitioned from restaurant worker to Chief Security Officer of Quantum Leap Technologies. The position had been Olivia's idea, offered with a salary that allowed him to provide for Ava's future while using skills that had been dormant for too long. But the job was more than just professional opportunity. It was a chance to apply his experience and training to protecting innovations that could benefit millions of people while working with someone whose intelligence and dedication impressed him more every day. When Olivia arrived, she carried the blueprints and technical specifications for Quantum Leap's new research facility, a state-of-the-art complex designed with security measures that incorporated every lesson they had learned from the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed the company. The federal grant approval came through yesterday, she announced, spreading the documents across Daniel's dining room table while Ava continued practicing piano in the background. $200 million for clean energy research with specific funding for battery storage technology. That's incredible, Daniel said, studying the facility plans that would make Quantum Leap one of the most advanced research centers in the world. When do you break ground? Next month. But there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. Daniel looked up from the blueprints, recognizing the tone in Olivia's voice that indicated she was approaching a subject that was important to her personally rather than just professionally. The new facility will require a complete security infrastructure, she continued. Physical security, personnel screening, counterintelligence protocols, emergency response capabilities. It's a position that would require someone with extensive experience in all those areas. You're offering me the job. I'm offering you a partnership, Olivia corrected. Chief of Security for the new facility, with equity participation and decision-making. Authority over all security matters. It would mean relocating to Colorado, but the schools there are excellent and the quality of life is significantly better than what you can provide here on a restaurant worker's salary. Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering the implications of what she was proposing. The position would be a significant step forward in his career, providing financial security and professional challenges that would allow him to build on his Army experience rather than simply leaving it behind. But more importantly, it would mean continuing to work with Olivia in an environment where their professional partnership could develop into something deeper and more personal. What does Ava think about Colorado? He asked. Why don't you ask her yourself? Olivia suggested, gesturing toward the living room where his daughter had finished practicing and was listening to their conversation with the careful attention of someone who understood that important decisions were being discussed. Ava, how would you feel about moving to Colorado and living near mountains and skiing in new schools? His daughter considered the question with the seriousness she applied to all significant matters. Would Ms. Miller be there too? Yes, Olivia answered before Daniel could respond. I would be there, and we would see each other regularly because your dad and I would be working together. Would I have my own room in a house like this one? You would have your own room in an even better house, Olivia confirmed. With space for a garden if you wanted to grow vegetables, and maybe room for a dog if your dad agrees. Ava's eyes widened at the mention of a dog, a possibility that had been impossible in their apartment, but had been her most consistent request for the past 2 years. Can I think about it for a few minutes? She asked, demonstrating the careful decision-making process that Daniel had taught her for important choices. While Ava retreated to her room to consider the possibilities, Daniel and Olivia continued reviewing the facility plans and discussing the security requirements that would protect both the technology and the people developing it. "There's something else," Olivia said during a pause in their technical discussion. "Something I've been wanting to say for weeks but haven't found the right moment." Daniel looked up, recognizing the shift to personal rather than professional conversation. "When I first met you in that parking garage, I thought you were just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time with the skills to help me. But over these months, I've realized that you're much more than that." She paused, choosing her words carefully in the way she approached all important communications. "You're someone who makes difficult decisions based on what's right rather than what's convenient. You're someone who protects people not because it's your job, but because it's who you are. And you're someone who has raised an extraordinary daughter, while building a life that most people couldn't manage under normal circumstances, let alone after losing your wife and leaving your career." Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came when people acknowledged sacrifices he had made without expecting recognition or appreciation. "What I'm trying to say," Olivia continued, "is that I admire you not just as a professional colleague, but as a person. And I think we could build something together, professionally and personally, that would be better than either of us could achieve separately." Before Daniel could respond, Ava returned to the dining room with a focused expression that indicated she had reached a decision. "I think we should move to Colorado," she announced, "but I have some conditions." "Let's hear them," Daniel said, smiling at his daughter's negotiating approach. "First, I want to visit our new house before we move so I can see my room and make sure it's a good place for homework and reading." "That's reasonable," Olivia agreed. "Second, I want to keep in touch with Emma Richardson because she's my friend, and she taught me important things about staying safe." "Emma will always be welcome to visit us," Daniel confirmed. "Third, I want Ms. Miller to promise that she'd teach me about her inventions and maybe let me help with science projects that are appropriate for my age level." Olivia laughed, the first genuinely carefree expression Daniel had seen from her since they met. "I think I can promise that. You're already asking better questions about energy storage than some of my graduate research assistants." "And fourth," Ava continued, saving her most important condition for last, "I want Dad to be happy. He's been taking care of me for a long time, and I think he should have someone to take care of him sometimes too." The simple statement, delivered with the clarity that only young people possess, cut through months of careful professional boundaries and unspoken personal feelings. Daniel realized that his daughter had been observing the growing connection between him and Olivia with the perceptiveness that had always characterized her approach to important relationships. "I think that can be arranged," he said quietly, meeting Olivia's eyes across the table covered with blueprints and technical specifications for a future they would build together. 3 months later, Daniel stood in the driveway of their new house in Boulder, watching Ava explore the backyard with a golden retriever puppy that Olivia had insisted was essential for proper rural living. The house was larger than anything he had imagined providing for his daughter, with mountain views that stretched to the horizon and space for the kind of stable, secure life he had always wanted to give her. Emma Richardson had visited the previous weekend, officially to inspect the security arrangements for their new home, but actually to see Ava's reaction to the move and ensure that Daniel's daughter was adapting well to the changes in their lives. "She's thriving," Emma had observed, watching Ava teach the puppy to sit while explaining the physics of leverage and fulcrums in language that suggested Olivia's influence on her scientific education. The Quantum Leap Research Facility was under construction 5 miles away, a gleaming complex that would house some of the most advanced energy research in the world. Daniel's office would overlook the main laboratory where Dr. Beaumont and his expanded team were developing battery technology that could revolutionize transportation renewable energy storage, and climate change mitigation. But as he watched his daughter play with her dog in the yard of their new home, Daniel realized that the most important transformation wasn't professional or financial, it was personal. For the first time since his wife's death, he was building a life rather than simply maintaining one. When Olivia arrived that evening with takeout from their favorite restaurant and updates on the facility construction, she found Daniel and Ava on the back porch, reading together in the comfortable silence that had always characterized their relationship. "How was your day?" she asked, settling into the chair beside Daniel, while Ava continued reading aloud from a book about space exploration. "Perfect," he replied, understanding that the word applied not just to the day, but to the life they were building together. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures. Just three people who had found, in their own quiet way, that sometimes the best security system is having someone who cares enough to protect what matters most. And sometimes the greatest innovations come not from technology or strategy, but from the simple decision to show up for each other, day after day, building something better than any of them could have achieved alone. The future stretched ahead of them with possibilities that none of them had imagined 6 months earlier. Professional challenges that would apply Daniel's skills to protecting innovations that could benefit the world. Educational opportunities that would nurture Ava's curiosity and intelligence. And personal relationships based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of love that grows slowly and sustainably over time. As the sun set behind the mountains, and Ava finished her chapter about the moons of Jupiter, Daniel realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for since leaving the army, a mission worth dedicating his life to, a place where his skills could make a positive difference, and a family that had chosen each other through circumstances that tested their courage, resilience, and commitment to protecting what they valued most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.